What's up guys, this is Kate Unlimited. Welcome to episode 25 of Spill the Tearal, which is a JRPG podcast where I go over some JRPG news, releases, mechanics, what I've been playing, want to play, and more. And this week we're going to be talking about the Neverness to Everness game announcement, my time continuing to play Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero, potential VR JRPGs, and more. And so this is the 25th episode. I forgot to mention this last week in the special episode, but with the last week's episode, I believe we have officially passed the 6-month mark of this podcast, which to me is insane. It doesn't feel like I've been doing this podcast for that long, but 6 months is fucking insane if you think about it, half a year. So it's pretty cool to see that I've been doing it this long. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but the entire plan of this podcast was to test it out for 3 months to see if it goes anywhere. If pretty much my criteria was if I enjoyed it for 3 months and if it has some, viewership, I'll keep doing it. And it did, and that's why I still do it. And so yeah, so we're done 6 months. Let's see if we can get to a year and we'll see how it is then and if I still want to keep going at that point. So yeah, so that is something good. And also, as I mentioned all the time, if you are listening to this podcast on audio services, remember to give 5 stars. It helps a bunch with audio listenership as how they find the podcast with the algorithms and shit like that. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all the normal stuff. I have a Twitter at Spill the Tearal. I'll be honest, I haven't used it that much lately because I've been busy, but that is there in case I start using it more often again. So last week was a special episode. It was another tier list episode. Like the Kingdom Hearts tier list, my last tier list episode, which was the Trails one, also did good on YouTube, which is not surprising. I feel like that is a video that is more clickable than just like a podcast episode, which is cool to see. I don't know what I want to do with that information. I'm not sure if that means do I want to make that a separate video series that I do more often or what. I think I'm going to keep it as a special episode thing only because I also mentioned this in my Trails tier list video, but there's not any other game series I can really do that with. Like I did the tier list on Kingdom Hearts, I did the tier list on the Trail series. I don't think there's any other series which I've played enough where I can make a proper tier list, because I was thinking of the E series. I haven't really played all of it, so I can't really do that properly. And if there are any other series, they aren't technically JRPGs. Like the Ratchet & Clank series is probably one that I can do, but I still haven't played all of those, and that's technically our JRPG series, so I don't know if I would even do that. But yeah, I'll probably just keep tier lists as like a special episode thing. And speaking of special episodes, there probably will be more special episodes in the coming month or so. If you're watching a video, I don't know if it's obvious from my background or not. I can't tell if it is, but I have like boxes around my room, and like my back desk is like really fucking messy. I'm in the middle of packing right now because I'm gonna move soon, and so that's why I've been doing special episodes and things like that. And so I had some time today to do a full episode. I honestly shouldn't be doing it because I do need time to do other stuff, but I thought I'd do a normal episode, and the episodes in the coming weeks may be special depending on if I have time or not. If I don't have time, it'll be a special episode. If I do have time, I'll do a normal episode. But yeah, I just want to update on that. And yeah, I also found it funny because I did a special episode last week, and also the other week that I did a special episode. Those weeks are always the weeks that have a bunch of news. And then the week that I actually come back to do an episode, there's not that much news. And so what ends up happening is, like, same with this week's episode, is the news I'm talking about and the release I'm talking about are mostly like last week's stuff, because this week didn't have that much. So if last week wasn't a special episode, this week would be pretty empty and boring. And so maybe it's good that I did do a special episode, but that's something I've been noticing that happens every time I've done a special episode, which is funny. But yeah, before we start, the one cool thing I want to show, which I like showing a random thing. I did a blind bag when I was traveling, and I got a Demon Slayer one, and I ended up getting my boy Inosuke, so I thought I'd show it. It's like this little, look at this little guy. He has his 2 swords. It's like the most like cheap ass figure you can like imagine if you're like listening. It's very tiny, but it's cool. I at least got Inosuke, which is like a person I'm okay with getting. I actually pulled a Naruto blind bag too, which had like Itachi, Sasuke, Naruto, Gaara, and I'm like, I'm okay with any of these characters as long as it's not Sakura, and I ended up getting Sakura, so I don't know what I'm gonna do with that. I don't hate her or anything, but like of those characters, that was definitely the one I would want least. But yeah, that's what ended up happening. And so before we get into the episode, let me just do the Spirited Away card thing that I usually do. Then pick a random card. Okay, everything is falling everywhere. Okay, we got the Queen of Clubs, which is the main character with the dude. They're just looking at each other and talking. So yeah, on that note, let's get into the first segment, which is JRPG news. So for the JRPG news this week, and as every week, I always source my news from Gematsu. One thing I do want to say is, like, I don't know how Gematsu works, or like if whether they have like a lot of writers or not. I hope they start tagging JRPG news better. It's very odd to me that they have a JRPG news section, and I checked this week and I'm like, there's like no JRPG news. There's like one news story. I'm like, okay, it's a week news story or a news week. And then I just went to the RPG section, which is general RPG news, and they had a fuck ton of JRPG news there. And so I was like, what the fuck? For some reason, they don't tag the JRPG news as JRPG a lot of the time. So like, there's a Dragon Quest news, there's like Visions of Mana news, which are obviously JRPGs, but they just weren't tagged as that. So I don't know what's happening there, but hopefully they start tagging JRPG news more accurately. But that is something I've been noticing. But yeah, we have a lot of random miscellaneous news stories, and we have like one that I'm the most interested in, which I'll talk about at the end, which is about a new game called Neverness to Everness. But let's start with some smaller stuff. First of all, there is another live stream announced for Metaphor ReFantazio. They've been doing these live streams to kind of drop info, and I've talked about some in depth in the past. I haven't been going that in depth recently because, you know, I've been busy, and also because I feel like I've had my fill of the game in terms of wanting to know information. At this point, I'll play it whenever it comes out and experience it. But I believe this is going to be the fourth stream, and they wrote here that the broadcast will feature and introduce the election candidates and followers in Alice's new fantasy RPG Metaphor ReFantazio with director Katsura Hashino. So I'm assuming that's all like in the context of the game, so I'm assuming there's some political plot happening in the game, and that's what they're talking about. And so yeah, so it just seems like more world building stuff. This is the type of stuff that I talk about where like, I don't know why you need to know this before the game comes out. Like, this is stuff where like, let me experience it in the game, but I guess if you really want as much information as you can get, this is a stream that is happening, and it's happening on July 29th. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, so very soon, in a few days from when I'm recording this. So that was one of the news stories. I also want to mention, and I don't think I usually ever mention this on the episode, but every time I'm kind of collating all the news, I feel like there's always news about Trail's Farewell to Zemuria, which is a game that's only in Japan, or is coming out in Japan, I think, which I'm assuming that's like the newest Trails game. I never look at the news story because I don't want to be spoiled, but I thought I would mention that there is news for it. So if you are interested in it, feel free to check out Gematsu or Google about it, because there is a news story about the newest Trails game in Japan. If you do care about that, I definitely do not want to fucking look at it because I don't want to be spoiled, and I am always spoiled just a little bit just by seeing the news story. But yeah, that is a thing. In case you're interested, feel free to check it out on Gematsu. Another news story: Rise of the Ronin has a demo available now. I believe like as I was planning this, I had released like 30 minutes ago, and so like it came out today. So that is something I don't know if I'll check out. If I have time, I might check it out. I don't really have time to play right now. I'm honestly gonna probably pack my PS5 very soon, and so I may check that out in the future, and if I do, I'll obviously talk about it on this podcast. But yeah, that is something that is out. Also, Tribe 9, the PC closed beta has been announced for August 9th to 15th. If you don't know what this game is, I talked about it in a past episode. I believe this is the game that's made by the Danganronpa developers, because they had a very similar visual style. But I think this was more of an action RPG compared to Danganronpa being more of a visual novel. And I did express interest about this game, and so the fact that there's a closed beta very soon in the next few weeks is pretty cool. So it's a PC closed beta from August 9th to 15th. Another announcement, one that is very nice for me, is Wuthering Waves has been officially announced to be in development for PlayStation 5. So fuck yes, this is amazing. I thought this announcement was weird because my brother actually told me about it, and this is something I've always wanted for PS5, because I swear to God, this was always a known thing. Because I think it's not like it was a surprise, because I believe Wuthering Waves was always supposed to be on PlayStation. Like, it was a listed console at some point. And so when they announced that it's coming for PS5, I'm like, yeah, it should have been. Like, it should have been in development, but it's nice to have further confirmation that it's coming, because it's weird because I really wanted a PS5 when it came out, but I'm so used to playing it on my phone now where like at this point I don't even know if I would play it 100% on the PS5. I probably would, but like I definitely treat it as a mobile game, so I'll see how much I play on the PlayStation 5, but it definitely is good, because I noticed for Wuthering Waves specifically, the analog stick doesn't feel as responsive as I would like it sometimes, because it's one of those games where like the analog stick disappears when you're not using it, and when you touch the screen it comes back. And so I've noticed sometimes in fights where I try to move, it just doesn't respond to my finger sometimes, which sucks, which isn't a thing in other games that I've played on my phone. So that's like the only reason that I would probably play on PS5, because I would have like full controller support. Or honestly, if they just add controller support to the mobile version, I might just keep playing on mobile. But nonetheless, it being on PlayStation 5 is nice, because I think Wuthering Waves is a fantastic game, and the more people that play it, the better. Next news story: Grand Blue Fantasy Versus Rising has a DLC character called Versugia, which is coming out August 20th. And I believe they also teased other characters called Vikala and Saldaphone. I didn't look too much into this, but if you're into Grand Blue Fantasy, that is happening, which is cool. It's always nice to see DLC characters being added to games. That's something I talked about in a previous episode too. I like post-release content. I know some people don't, but I always think it's a good idea as long as it's priced fairly, and the game's getting more characters, which is dope to see. And now these are the next few news stories are going to be a bit more detailed. So one of them is about Visions of Mana. So there was pretty much a kind of like a news/info dump for Visions of Mana, which details Aish, more elemental vessels, elemental plots, and Little Cactus, which I believe if you're more aware of the game, I haven't played any of the Mana games, so I don't know what those are, but based on me kind of skimming the article, some of these things are returning things. And so let me just read the synopsis real quick, or like the main description of it, which is: in Tianea, the fire village, everyone is preparing for the coming of the fairy and the naming of an elm. Every 4 years, elms from around the world are chosen to travel to the tree of mana and rejuvenate the flow of mana power by offering the souls. A soul guard accompanies the chosen alms to ensure their safe pilgrimage. On the day of the fairy's arrival, Vol, the new soul guard, brings his childhood friend Hina to the festival. As the sun falls beneath the skyline, all the spectators wait with bated breath, hoping to be chosen as an elm. The fairy finally descends before Hina, appointing her the Elm of Fire. The villagers bid them both farewell, praying for the success as they embark on the adventure of a lifetime. I believe this is the first time I'm reading the plot of the Visions of Mana game, which is weird. I feel like I might have, but like this seemed new to me, which is dope. I'm pretty sure I butchered every single fucking name. They're all spelled very unexpectedly, so I don't know if I said any of them right, but pretty interesting plot, because as I was reading, like if you didn't know, when I'm reading the plot for a new story, I purposefully don't read it until I'm recording just so I have my fresh thoughts. I didn't expect the main character's friend to be chosen. As I was reading this, I'm like, well, obviously the main character Val is gonna be chosen as like the elm or whatever the fuck that is, but Val's friend being chosen is pretty cool, so that's a pretty cool dynamic. So I'm assuming Val might be more of like a guard or something of her maybe on this adventure, but it sounds interesting. I've talked about this game more in depth previously, where it does look interesting to me. I've never played a Mana game, so I do want to try this at some point. But yeah, that's just a very small snippet of the news that was dropped for this game. If you really want to know in detail about everything they dropped, feel free to check it out on Gematsu. The other news story is Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake, details story, protagonist, world, spells, and abilities. So just like Visions of Mana, they had a pretty huge news dump for this game. And the description I can read off real quick is: the quaint kingdom of Aliahan, home of the great hero Ortega and you as child, and the story's protagonist. On your 16th birthday, you receive an order from the king to do what your late father could not and defeat the archfiend Baramos. Thus begins your journey to save the world. What surprises does fate have in store for you? So pretty generic plot. I'm pretty sure I've read this before in the past, but again, just like Visions of Mana, there's a lot of details posted for the game. If you really care about that stuff, go ahead. Like I mentioned, I don't really like knowing all that stuff before the release, but I did skim it. I saw some of the designs. I haven't played any of these Dragon Quest games, like the older ones. The only one I played is like most of 11, and so it's pretty cool to see. It's nice to see who this character is, because I recognize this Dragon Quest character from Smash. This is actually the design that I use whenever I use him in Smash, so it's pretty cool. I noticed there was a female version too. I'm not sure if that's a different character or that's just like a gender thing you can choose. I do think I do like the female version's design better. Like her hair is kind of like Teen Gohan-ish. I kind of wish like it was a guy with that hair, but I like the designs from what I've seen so far. But like I said, if you want to see everything in more detail of like the world, the spells and abilities, I was skimming through the article. It's a lot of detail. They go into the news in depth. Feel free to check it out in Gematsu. And the final news story, which is a supernatural urban open world RPG announced for the PS5, PC, iOS, and Android. So this is coming to most consoles. I don't think Xbox is here, but I think JRPGs usually don't come on Xbox. And I don't think it's on Switch either, which is interesting. I think at this point, phones are stronger than the Switch too, so it's kind of understandable. But this is, again, like a Genshin type game, so like Wuthering Waves, like Genshin, maybe even like Honkai Star Rail or Zenless Zone Zero, blah blah blah, like that type of game. And one thing that surprised me when I read it is apparently this is by the Tower of Fantasy developers, which is interesting to me because I tried playing Tower Fantasy when it came out, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, but to me it felt very half-baked. Like it felt kind of rough. The controller support really wasn't there, and while I did enjoy the few hours that I put into it, it did feel like it needed more time to cook before I would jump into it again. Recently I tried it again on the PlayStation 5 because it's out on the PlayStation 5 now, and honestly I didn't give it too much time. To be fair, I only gave like 45 minutes. It felt the same, honestly. It felt pretty rough. The controller support was like okay. I did like the game. I do think the game has a pretty strong intro, but again, it did feel pretty half-baked. I can't say anything for like the later stages of the game. I know they keep updating the game. I know there's like new locations, new plot developments and whatever, so maybe the first hour of the game is always going to be rough, but whenever like I did try playing the game, it felt like it was kind of rough. And so I was very surprised to hear that they're working on this new game now called Neverness to Everness, because this to me seems like the equivalent of when like Genshin did very well and they announced we're going to do Zenless Zone Zero, or like even Honkai Star Rail. This seems very similar where they have Tower Fantasy, which is like a Genshin Impact type game, and now they're working on Neverness to Everness. And if you watch the trailer, feel free to YouTube it or Google it. This very much seems like a Zenless Zone Zero visually, and like everything, like the style wise, it seems very much like Zenless Zone Zero, which I don't think they copied or anything. That's not how game development works. Game development obviously takes a long time. But when I look at this, I'm like, this very much seems like the Zenless Zone Zero equivalent to like Genshin Impact, which is interesting. But the more I read about it, the more interested I was, because one of the main things that was interesting that I found out is it feels like more of a sim game. I'll actually read the description first before moving on, which is: Neverness to Everness unfolds in a unique world where the ordinary and extraordinary coexist, a city teeming with anomalies and humans alike. As players, you will make a grand entrance into the city, employing your extraordinary Esper abilities to navigate and tackle the unexpected anomalies that await. Neverness to Everness also offers a variety of lifestyles for the players to choose from, modify sports cars, manage businesses, etc., and experience a vibrant urban life in the way you like. So first of all, it's urban, just like Zenless Zone Zero, as I mentioned, so it's like a modern city instead of being like some fantasy land. But the modify sports cars and manage businesses is very interesting. Manage businesses makes me think it might be more sim-like, but the modify sports cars, I was like, what? There's cars in here? And then when I watched the trailer, I'm like, this is straight up like, it looks like GTA. There was like a car, you got to customize it, you get to drive it around the city. So I'm really happy with like the turn these Genshin Impact type games are taking, because when I started seeing these Genshin Impact type games, I thought they were all going to be just like Genshin Impact, which is the exact same gameplay style, visual style, etc. But I'm liking that like all of them are doing something very different, where like Zenless Zone Zero obviously is made by the same developers as Genshin Impact, but like that is, if you played it, it is nothing like Genshin Impact. Gameplay wise, there's nothing like it. I'll say story wise, nothing like it. Setting wise is very different. This, that I would expect something to be like Genshin Impact, has like cars and stuff. So every game is putting a specific spin to it, which I'm really enjoying. And so while I came into Neverness to Everness thinking it was going to be like another Genshin Impact type game, it does seem very different from what I've seen so far. So I am looking forward to it. I kind of skimmed through the article. They showed some enemies. There's this one like enemy that was made out of film reels, which I thought was very cool. I'm really liking the focus of supernatural, which I think is very cool, because usually these type of games are more like, you know, focused on technology or fantasy, but I don't think they usually take a supernatural angle at it. So the fact that this is more supernatural focused and everyone has like Esper abilities, I think is a very cool twist. And so I'm definitely looking forward to this. I'm going to keep an eye on it. And Neverness to Everness is a pretty cool name too, honestly. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. And that will do it for the news section on Spill the Tearal. And from here, we're going to go on to the next segment, which is JRPGs that are releasing this week. For the JRPGs that are releasing this week, as always, I source them from rpgsite.net and icicledisaster.com. So I'm going to be going over the games that are released from July 21st to 27th. But because I missed last week, I'm also going to be covering the ones from July 14th to 20th. So the last 2 weeks, pretty much. So the first game, which is already out, came out on July 17th on PC, is Riviera: The Promised Land. I looked into it. This looks very similar to a game I talked about in the past. This may be the same game. Maybe it was a new story at some point, but it looks like a Game Boy looking isometric JRPG. And let me read the description right here, which is: you can enjoy the remastered version of Riviera: The Promised Land, the first work in the Department Heaven episode series, I believe. It's equipped with various additional convenient functions. The ease of play functions have been improved. It's full of elements and will satisfy everyone from first-time players to experienced players. So yeah, it pretty much just seems like a classic JRPG. Like the sprites also look kind of like they weren't remade, they look like upscale, so it has that type of look to it. And this is a description that's more of the actual like game, which is: at the behest of Hector, who was one of the 7th Magi, the Grim Angel Ein and his familiar Rose, along with another Grim Angel named Leda, all head to Riviera, an island floating in Asgard. On the way, Ursula, the guardian of Riviera, appears and is thwarted by the Grim Angel's intrusion. Ein, whose memories were sealed by Ursula's attack, wakes up in Elendia, where the spirits live. I almost feel like I read this exactly before, so I think I did talk about this at some point at a news story, and now that it's out now. So it came out on July 17th. Honestly, visually and like combat-wise, which looks like, you know, classic JRPG, it looks interesting to me. This is the type of game which like I may one day, if I really want to, get on my Steam Deck or something and play. I don't really have time right now, but this is definitely a game that I feel like I would play at some point if I like ever really needed a game to play, rather than just skipping over it. The next game I'll talk about, which isn't technically a JRPG, but I thought I would just still mention it, which is called Dungeons of Hinterberg on the Xbox Series consoles on PC. It came out on the 18th of July. It's not a JRPG. It looks dope. It's kind of like this 3D game, but in case someone was interested, I thought I'd bring it up. It has this kind of like 3D cel-shaded look, but based on like the trailer, the environments look super cool. So there's this one environment where there's like glowing crystals in a cave. There's one where like you're just like on snowy mountains. There's another one where you're like in this poisonous swamp looking place. It looks super cool visually. Gameplay wise, it feels like, at least from the trailer, like it's an open world adventure type game. So yeah, and there's like a description I guess I should read, which is: armed with a sword and a tourist guide, explore the beautiful Alpine village of Hinterberg and uncover the magic hidden within its dungeons. Master magic, solve puzzles, slay monsters. All this and more await you in Hinterberg. So yeah, pretty much what I mentioned. Looks like a open world adventure puzzle game almost. But yeah, technically not a JRPG. Still look cool. That's why I thought I'd mention it. Now on the 25th of July, which is tomorrow from when I'm recording this, on the Switch, Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus is being released. Now, this is a game I can recommend. It's really fucking good. If you don't know what this game is, as you probably know if you've listened to this podcast, I love the Trails games. This is a game made by the Trails developers. And pretty much what they did is they took the technology of Trails, like the actual like engine or whatever, and just made their own game. And that's what it is. So it has the same bonding mechanics, has the same visual style. In some instances, it has the same character models for some characters, which is very interesting. And they pretty much just made their own world and their own story and their own characters and just made a story out of that. And so I always pretty much recommend this game if you ever want to try a Trails of Cold Steel game without, dumping all the time to Trails of Cold Steel, because that is, like a tetralogy. Try Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus. I think gameplay wise, you pretty much get the same experience. The only main difference is, instead of the turn-based combat of Trails of Cold Steel, Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus has real-time combat, which was pretty fun. It's very simple, but it's enjoyable, and it may be good to get into right now because I believe Trails as a series is going to be moving to real-time combat in the future. Maybe in Japan it already did, but that is a change they're making it, so might as well get used to it in this game. And it is a single game, so you can kind of be done with it. And also I believe it is it takes place in modern times too. It takes place in, actually, it's called Tokyo Xanadu. I was going to say it takes place in Tokyo. So there's not that much of a barrier of entry. It's very good. And also, this is the EX Plus version. And I believe there's multiple differences, but I believe the main difference is there is a character that's in the story, which is very interesting. That's a mystery, which I won't spoil. But in the EX Plus version, you get to play as them between every chapter. So every time you do a chapter of the main game, there's going to be a side chapter where you get to play as them and do their story. And then you go back to the main chapter and you keep doing that until they kind of converge. And so if you're interested at all, I would say check it out. It's coming out on Switch. It's already out on Steam a long time ago. I believe it's on PlayStation 2. And so yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It's a very cool game. And the last release date, which is on the 26th of July, also on the Switch, is One Piece Odyssey. This is a game I've talked about before too. It's a turn-based One Piece game. It's something I've wanted to try. I think I didn't get it because I played the demo and the actual adventure aspect of it seemed kind of meh. The actual going around islands, the movement felt whatever. It didn't feel like you kind of jump around and go wherever you'd want. Something you would kind of want to do when you're playing as Luffy. And while the battling seemed cool, I did think also that the battling seemed kind of, I can't think of the right word. I want to say nauseous, but that's not the right word. Is you'd go into battle and then they would randomly place all your characters, and each of your characters would be surrounded by enemies, and I never had a good idea of where everyone was. So I'd be playing as Luffy, I'd see 3 bad guys, and I'd see Usopp all the way in the distance with his own bad guys, and then when you're done, then it would go to Usopp, and then when you're done with him, it would go to Zoro and he's somewhere else. And I was never sure how many bad guys there were and what the field actually looked like. So the battling seemed kind of weird. The actual battle system I thought was really fun and really cool, and for a turn-based game was very interesting, but because of those issues I just didn't end up buying it. I do think I'll play it at some point because it is an original story and you do get to go through the kind of big points of the actual series, like Marineford and things like that, and so maybe I'll try it at some point when it's cheaper. But yeah, One Piece Odyssey is now finally coming to Switch on the 26th of July, and that does it for the release dates of JRPGs this week, actually the last 2 weeks technically. And from here on, we're going to go to the next segment, which is a JRPG mechanic that I think is dope. So the JRPG mechanic that I want to bring up technically isn't a mechanic, but it's something you see a lot in JRPGs. I want to say you see this in other things too, but I want to talk about how I really love when JRPGs become franchises / series. And as I mentioned a billion times, I love the Trail series, and I love Kingdom Hearts, which is the main focus of this channel in the past. And so those game series, I've always loved them, but I couldn't in the past kind of pinpoint why I really like them. And at some point I realized the reason I really like them is because they are series. They give you enough time to really fall in love with the characters, the worlds, the settings, whatever it may be, and really get to know them. And over time I've realized that at this point in my life, I don't think I can ever enjoy a single piece of media ever again, as in a standalone piece of media, to the point where this isn't even with games, with movies too, where the only movies I've actually legitimately enjoyed in the past like decade or whatever are ones that are part of series. So I remember like when the Marvel craze was happening, I was enjoying those movies because that was technically part of series. Any movie that I enjoy these days are usually anime movies because technically they're building off the plot of the anime. So like while that is a standalone movie, I have an understanding of the characters and the worlds and whatnot from the actual anime or manga. And so when you compare all that, whether that be like 10 hours or 20 hours or 100 hours or like 500 hours when we talk about video game series, I can't really find the same enjoyment from a game that may just be 30 hours and is done. Like you're never going to be jumping into the world again, or a movie that's just 2 hours and done and you're never going to be able to jump into the world again. Because when you have something, for example, like with Trails, you have like this continent they speak of, you have all these towns, you have all these people, these NPCs, these characters you learn, like everyone has their own plot points, like these political factions, the technology they have established in the world, the companies that run the technology. When you know all that, why would you just want that for one game and just never touch it again? That's like a weird thought. And so for me, series are just natural because I really want to get to know the world and kind of stay in it whenever I go into a new game. Like whenever a new game comes out, the way I think about it is like I get to jump into the world once more, be immersed in that world, and once I'm done with the game, I'm out again. That's kind of the way I think about it. And so a standalone game to me is like being able to jump into a world and coming out and never being able to go in again. Obviously I can replay the game, but I feel like that's just like a different experience overall, and I'm usually not a fan of replaying stuff these days because I don't really have that much time. And so if I were to jump into something, it would probably be something new or something that I love so much that I would replay it after a long time. And also if you think about it another way, all the things that I talked about of what I love in series, such as the world, the characters, the technology, systems, whatever, if it is a standalone game, chances are all those things are not as developed because why would they be? For example, imagine a world where the Trail series was just a game. All that stuff wouldn't be as developed. Like, why would they develop Zemuria to have all these towns and all these characters and all these technology companies? They probably wouldn't. Like, if we're talking about like the Azure series in Trails, it would just be Crossbell, and they would probably mention the other like Erebonia and whatever and Calvert, but like they probably wouldn't delve deep into them. They might mention like the companies of those cities, but we probably wouldn't dive deep. Whereas we know Erebonia has like a certain company, and we know that company has a character that's very important in terms of Cold Steel and blah blah blah. Like you get to know the world very well when you have an entire series. But if it was a standalone game, not only would you not be able to delve deep into those things, but also there probably wouldn't be deepness to delve into in the first place. And so yeah, it's like the way I see it is like it's just not worth my time to play those standalone games because they just wouldn't satisfy me as much as a series would. And I thought this was something that was just a thing for video games for me, but like I mentioned with movies, I'm like that now. And same with like books. I've been getting into books more recently, but I've been kind of getting some standalone books, and a lot of the times I just fall off or something. And like even when I get like, there is a book that I read which I really love. It's a light novel. I think it's called like Tunnel to Summer or something like that, which I really enjoyed. But that's also one of those things where like I read it and I'm just like, okay, like I enjoyed it, but like I can't do anything with it anymore. I'm just done. Whereas something that I read for the first time earlier this year was Harry Potter. I had never read it or watched it ever in my life, and I fucking loved that. And the reason I love that is because it's a series. It's a fucking long ass 7-book series, and so I really enjoyed going through it. Whereas if that was one book, I'd be like, okay, like I'm done. I'm never gonna go into it again. And Harry Potter is actually something that I might see myself like going back into because it's like it's a world that's pretty interesting. And so that's just another example where like, say it took me like 30 hours to read the Harry Potter series. How can you compare like a 5-hour book to that? You usually cannot, unless that fucking book is a masterpiece. But like, I don't know if there is one. So yeah, I just think franchise/series are a very specific part of JRPGs because JRPGs are already known to be so long. Like these days Western games are just like 20 hours, where like JRPGs still are hitting like that 80-hour 100-hour mark a lot of the times. And then on top of that, when you think about that, there may be 5, like let's just take Trails of Cold Steel, just that, not even the rest of the Trail series. 4 games, each of them may be like 80 hours. That's like 300 to 400 hours that you're getting, compared to like a 20-hour Western game that's standalone. Is like, you can think about it however you want, but I can't think of a single 20-hour game that would ever match the experience of like a 300 to 400 hour Trail series, especially because I know it was done well. If it was done shittily, that's one thing, but because I know it's done well, it's like I will always side with series, and hopefully that is something that keeps going. I am kind of worried because Reverie wasn't as beefy, and like it was kind of like, so far from what I played, it's not as like deep as I wanted to compared to the other Trails games. But as long as it's building onto a series, I'm okay with it. And so yeah, that's pretty much where I'll end off my thoughts on why I prefer series in JRPGs, and it's something that hopefully more JRPGs keep doing. And from here, we'll move on to the next segment, which is a JRPG I'm looking forward to. Now, for the JRPG I'm looking forward to, this is going to be one of those weeks where I'm actually going to be talking about a potential JRPG instead of a specific JRPG that I'm looking forward to. And I thought this would be a very interesting one, where a JRPG that I would look forward to is a JRPG in VR. Now, I believe some of these do exist. Like I feel like I've seen some like on the Meta app where like there are like these JRPG looking games, but all of them, because of like how VR is and how it's still kind of like an emerging platform, they're all like very gimped, where like it's either very short or like you can't do that much stuff in it. One example, which I don't even know if I'd consider a JRPG, which was, I believe it was a game called Zenless, which me and my brother played. It was more of an MMO, but it had kind of a JRPG vibe, but like the mechanics in it were so simple where if it was a normal game, it just wouldn't be good. For example, like all the quests that me and my brother were doing when we were playing that in VR was like an NPC would be like, hey, can you gather 20 wheat for me? And you'd go gather 20 wheat. Or can you kill those 5 monsters for me? It was like simple shit like that, but it was still fun because it was in VR. But when I talk about wanting a JRPG in VR, what I mean is the exact experiences that I get in a JRPG normally, I want to experience that in VR. So as always, I'm going to use Trails as an example, but when I play Trails, what I like in it is it's a very detailed world. There are detailed characters. There are a fuck ton of NPCs that I can just talk to. There are fun battles, and there is a very nice cohesive plot. And it's a beefy story, like it's long. All those things usually you just don't get on VR because like I can't even imagine a 100-hour game in VR. That's just not a thing that happens right now. But I want to get to a point in the future where like just so we're like cemented and we can all think of like the same thing. Let's take Trails 1 for example. That's a game that maybe some of you have played, but it's pretty much a JRPG, and it mostly takes place within a school, but every once in a while you do have to go to another town or city to play there, and you come back to school, and that's pretty much the game loop. And so let's take that game. It's like 80 hours for example, and imagine that in VR. That's the type of experience I want, where like you can actually be immersed and feel like you actually are a student in this school. There are some sections where you actually do have to like study and take tests because there are very small like things in Trails that do that. There are side quests where you have to do some weird stuff like swim or something. I'm not sure how that would work in VR, but at the same time, in the game there are certain sections where like you have to go to this like random town and explore it. Doing that in VR would be very cool. There are times where you have to go into a bigger city and explore that would be dope in VR. There's literally a location called I believe the Northern Highlands, I believe they're called, which is pretty much these big ass grass area where you have to explore on horseback. That would be pretty fucking cool in VR. I'm not sure how it would work. Again, a lot of this doesn't seem possible, but the reason I'm talking about this as an example is imagine that scope of game in VR and how amazing that experience would be, because these experiences are already very fucking cool on console or like on a controller on a TV. Imagine actually being able to be in the North Highlands and going through these grassy areas and seeing the mountain tops and like ancient statues and things like that. Like that's a pretty cool thing to think about. And imagine on top of that, there's a dope ass story, a lot of characters, NPCs you can talk to. You can actually feel like you're talking to people there. Like that would be very cool. And so that's what I mean when I say I want a JRPG in VR. It's not that I want a JRPG for VR how we see it today, where it'd be very short, it would be very simple. It's like, no, I want to like imagine like to even like if you never played Trails, think of your favorite JRPG right now and imagine that was in VR. That's pretty much what I'm talking about, like the same scope, same detail. And I kind of imagine like how would they do that, because one of my favorite things in Trails is literally, this may sound weird, but it's literally just talking to NPCs. I love getting plot through NPCs, and so in VR that would be very interesting because I doubt they would give voices to everyone, so like it would still be like you just reading stuff. I'm not sure what the best way for that would be. Like maybe like they will literally just have like small speech bubbles on top of their heads, and that's the best way to do it. But being actually able to look at the NPCs in the eye, see their height, if you're like talking to like, you know, some kids just fucking around and playing around, just being actually able to crouch down and talk to them, that'd be a funny experience too. So just thinking about like little things like that and actually being immersed in a world, because there are so many places in Trails games where like you're in like this small farm village and like the vibes seem so fucking immaculate, and actually being there in VR, seeing the sunset or whatever, like just like being in the town, like I can already imagine, and I would love that experience. And so yeah, just having the exact same experiences in VR that I get in JRPGs right now, I think is something that I'd want to experience at some point in my life. I don't think it's ever going to happen because these are usually like pretty beefy experiences, but the more I think about just playing Trails in VR, the more I'm like, this is something I definitely want at some point. I don't think it's ever going to be made, but again, this is a JRPG that I would look forward to But yes, from here we'll go on to the next segment, which is what I've been playing. Now, what I've been playing for the last week, or last 2 weeks technically, not much. I think it's pretty much the same as last week, maybe, which is Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero. So I'll just give like very short updates on these two games. Zenless Zone Zero, I've been playing more. I've been doing the story. I'm very much enjoying the story, like where it's going. I'm enjoying the random events and stuff they have. The one thing that I've not been liking is I feel like I've been hitting the level limit more often. If you don't know, the way these games work is you do the story, then once you're done the story, they'd be like, okay, you're level 35 right now. If you want to do more of the story, get to level 38. And then you have to just figure out and do random shit until you're that level, and then you can, do the rest of the story. And while these games have always been like that, like Wuthering Waves is my direct comparison point right now. Wuthering Waves had that, but I never felt like it was a hindrance, because Wuthering Waves is an open world game where like whenever I hit that limit I was like, oh, that sucks, but there was so many quests to do where I was like, fine, and because it's open world I can just fuck around and kill bad guys. Where with Zenless Zone Zero, because it's not an open world game, because it's mission based, it does feel like I just kind of have to stop playing and like do the daily quest, and that's the way you have to get the levels, which kind of sucks. So, but like that is just a fact of the genre of the game, where like it's not open world, where like, again, Wuthering Waves, I can just turn on Wuthering Waves, I don't even have to do a quest, I can just fuck around for 10 minutes, fight bad guys, and I'm good. Where with Zenless Zone Zero, you have to specifically go out of your way to pick a certain type of mission to do, and that's how the gameplay loop is. Because of that, sometimes like I found, for example, there's like this certain type of mission I found in Zenless Zone Zero which gives you a fuck ton of XP for your levels, and so that's what I try to do to kind of level up. But you can only do those using your energy, and you have a limited amount of energy per day. And so like there were some days where like I was free, I wanted to play Zenless Zone Zero, but I did those missions, I was out of energy, and because I'm not at the level to continue the story, there's just literally nothing for me to do other than replaying old missions. But there's really no point of doing that, and so like I would just have to not play the game until the next day, which is like on a normal day that's fine, obviously, and like I haven't been playing regularly for the last few days. But it kind of sucks when like I have this rare free day and I want to play Zenless Zone Zero, but like because of just like the part I am in the game, I just cannot continue, which sucks. Whereas with something like Wuthering Waves, I feel like because it's an open world, I can like play it no matter what and be good with it and enjoy it more. But to talk about more of the positives in Zone Zero, something that I've been really liking is the DVD system, or the VCR system at least. I believe I might have touched on this 2 weeks ago. In case I haven't, I guess I'll touch on it again, which what they do is that whenever you're in that part of the game where like you have to level up before you do the story, they'll give you these VCRs which represent side stories of characters. So for example, if you know a character in the game, they'll give you a VCR and it'll be like a 3-part story flashback where you get to play as certain levels with that side character to learn more about them, which I thought was very cool. So some of the side stories have been with characters that you straight up just haven't met in the main story yet. Some of them have been characters that you have met in the main story, but you just get to learn more about them. These are probably my favorite part of the game so far, because I'm interested in plot stuff, and just learning more about these characters or learning about completely new characters through this way, I think have been very interesting. And so that is something I think the game has done very good. And also, I think the events have been done very well in the game. There's an event that's going on right now, which is about bang boos, which is like those little rabbit creatures you have, where like the bang boo that you kind of use throughout the entire game, you kind of see him become, or see it become more like, I want to say more human, where like it's kind of making friends with other bang boos, and those bang boos are trying to go on a mission, and your bang boo is trying to help them, and so you're trying to help it out almost as like a parent figure trying to get through this mission, which is really funny. And so this is an event where like I've been doing it for a long time and it's still going on, which I think is interesting. So I just think the events have been good too. The only main negative is like that leveling cap that they have to keep doing for the story, which I understand, but like at the same time, it's not fun whenever you hit that. But yeah, Zenless Zone Zero, that has been my experience with it in the last 2 weeks. And with Wuthering Waves, not too much to talk about it. The only real thing I want to mention is there was the update a few weeks ago I mentioned that I did the story of. And I'd mentioned that there's this character that I really wanted called Chong Li, and I was waiting until they added her as a pull. They added her a few days ago. I did so many pulls. I finally got her. I think it took me like 120, 130 pulls. I didn't pay money, obviously. I don't do that, but like I had enough currency in the game to do it. I'm pretty much fully out. I think I can only do like one more pull, then I'm done. So luckily I got her. She plays dope as fuck. I love how she plays. I pretty much just pick characters that play like fun, and like she definitely plays fun. But yeah, so I've been using her. I've just been mainly just going around fighting bad guys. I haven't really been doing that many quests. I believe they've added a character quest for Chong Li too, which I haven't done, which I really want to do soon. But there's still so much for me to do in the game that I haven't done, in terms of like there's I think playing Jian. He has a character quest that I haven't done. I believe there's an exploration quest I haven't done, which are usually pretty long. There's a bunch of side quests that I haven't done. So Wuthering Waves for me still is something that I can like really go back into and like keep playing. And so far, honestly, it sounds funny to say, but it probably is one of my goatees this year. Like it's just been a game which like feels like home to me almost. Like I can go back to it and I feel very comfortable playing it and I really enjoy it. So yeah, that's just been my experience with Wuthering Waves for the past 2 weeks too. And yeah, that's pretty much what I've been playing for the past 2 weeks. From here, we'll move on to the final segment, which is my JRPG top casual list. Now for my JRPG top casual list, which is a top list that I make pretty casually just off the top of my head, this week I thought I would do my top Wuthering Waves characters, which is pretty interesting now that I've been playing long enough. What are my top 3 characters? Now, again, this is a casual list, as in I think about it for like 5 seconds and just give you my list and any points that I want to. And if you have a top list, let me know down below. But for me, right now, what they would be probably is number 3 is, I believe her name is Jian Shin. Number 2 is Kelcharo, and number 1 is Chongli. Now, let me go for number 1. Number 1 is Chongli. This is 100% biased because she is new. I've wanted her since I played her in the story because I thought she fought cool as fuck, and now that I've pulled her, I've been really enjoying playing with her. And in terms of like pure fun, I've enjoyed playing with her the most. And so yeah, Chongli, she's number 1 right now. Before I got Chongli, that's what Kelcharo was for me, so he's a number 2. He is like this thunder sword guy. Chongli's like a fire sword girl, and Kelcharo, he's really fun. He's very interesting where he just straight up has not showed up in the story at all as a character. Like he's never been like hinted at or anything, but he's a character you just get to pull. And so I think his design is really fucking dope. I think he just fights very fun and cool, and there's just a lot of mystery about like who he is. I've read his kind of plot summary thing they have when you go into the character, but I'm really interested to see when he actually gets added to the story and why the fuck they even made him a playable character this early. But yeah, Kelcharo's number 2, and number 3 is Jian Shin. I hope I'm getting her name right. I didn't double check. I usually just call her the monk girl, but she is like this monk fist fighting girl, and she uses, I believe, wind. That's her element. But I enjoy using her. I would say fun wise, she is not the most fun. The main reason I keep her in my trio is because she has like healing properties, which is like she can create a shield around herself and the other characters, which is pretty useful. I think literally this morning I was playing, I finally replaced her with another character for just to see if I want to change things up. I believe that character, her name is Tao Chi, I think, which is like this pink haired healer girl. So I'm trying her out to see maybe if she's better as a healer or not. But yeah, I've just used Jian Shin from the start of the game, so I thought I would mention her because I do enjoy her. I don't enjoy her gameplay as much, but I do enjoy the shield aspect, and I think her design is super cool too, and she has been in the story a bit, so I like her character too. But yeah, number 1 is Chongli, number 2 is Kelcharo, and number 3 is Jian Shin. And from here, we will end off episode 25 of Spill the Tearal. Looks like this episode was a normal length, which is good. I thought it would be too long, but it isn't. Like I always say, if you're listening on audio services, remember to 5-star this podcast. It helps a bunch. If you're on YouTube, like it. If you like it, comment whatever you want. That would be appreciated. If you didn't know, I upload this, like the video version, on 2 channels. I have the Cage Unlimited channel, which is like where I do everything, and I have the Spill the Tearal channel, which I only upload Spill the Tearal episodes, and I also do segments where like I can cut out every segment for you guys to watch if you're only interested in one of those. And like I mentioned at the top of this episode, I may be doing special episodes more often for the next month as I kind of like start packing and stuff. And so if you see a special episode, that's probably why. But yeah, thank you guys for checking out episode 25. I'll see you next week for episode 26. Peace.